Hello and welcome to Movie Night with Andy and Gabe. I'm Andy and with me is my co-host, the best thing since sliced bread, currently recording out of a bread tin, Gabriel.
I am currently recording out of a bread tin. We don't call it a tin here. We would call it a box or something like that. We almost never use the word tin because I'm a fucking American. But
Believe it or
I'll
not,
have
I
you
should have
know,
said bread bin, but I just misspoke. And now I'm keeping it.
we don't say that either. But um, I'll have you know, I am not the greatest thing since sliced bread because if you knew how old I was, you would know that sliced pre-sliced bread had not been invented when I was born. So there you go.
I've
That's a
got some.
lie.
I was going to say, if that's the case, I've got some horrible news from you about how behind the times America is. Today,
Well, let me just say real quick, sorry. Since we're talking about bread, in America, we don't, and I know the only reason I know this is because of things that you've told me about and shown me. In America, we don't actually have bread. What we consider bread in America is considered cake in the UK. So there's a fun fact about bread.
I saw canned bread as an American thing, and I just closed the laptop and I went to bed.
Well, what the fuck? I've never heard of that. Canned bread?
Yeah, and I thought, oh, maybe it's like they use it for bread pudding or something, but no, people make sandwiches with it. I don't even
I have
understand how.
never heard of that.
I do not understand how you would even get it out of the can.
Was that some shit from like Fallout shelters or something?
I don't know. I don't get
Where
how it.
did you see this at?
I said it as a joke, and then I realised that America definitely has canned bread, and then I googled it, and then I wish I hadn't.
Oh shit. I'm looking at it right here. I thought maybe you might have been talking about like the Pillsbury like muffins or whatever that you get out of those like
Oh, steak
out of those
muffins.
cylinders. Yeah, but no, here with brown bread. What the fuck? This actually is bread in a can. That's insane. Dude, I had no idea. And it's $50? What the hell? I have no idea this existed.
Well, moving swiftly along before we both blow our brains out.
Yeah.
Today,
Um,
fuck me, man. What was you gonna say?
I was gonna say today we're talking about a anime called Summer Wars.
Yeah, we're doing our first animated film. This one was my suggestion because I felt like I hadn't really gone for enough crowd pleasers, and I thought that this could have been more of a fun one as opposed to something like Papillon or 1 Hour Photo, where you're just sort of sitting there and you're like, I mean, yeah, it's a good film, but do I like it? Do I like
Hmm.
seeing this person suffering?
Right.
So yeah, I went with Summer Wars, the first animated film we've ever covered, which is a little surprising. Um, but yeah, it's time to talk about some fucking cartoons. Let's go.
Yes.
Um,
The anime people are gonna really resent you for calling it cartoons, but you know what? Fuck them. It's cartoons.
no, it is a cartoon, and what winds me up about this? Oh god, here I go. What winds me up about this is people will act as though anime and cartoons are not the same thing. And then people go, oh, Avatar The Last Airbender is an American anime. No, it's not. It's a cartoon. Anime is just the Japanese term for animated films, and it doesn't get any more complex than that.
You know, if we get anything in the comments, if anybody listening to this cares to engage in a debate in the comments below about what is and isn't anime, I want to pose this question to them. And if you're going to engage, I want you to directly answer this question. Was Silverhawks an anime? Go ahead.
So, Summer Wars is a movie that's actually hard to talk about because of the experience that you have watching it, because there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of moving parts, and they're all happening at once. There's a lot of themes and ideas that are layered into the film. Actually, I would say more so than any other film we've maybe talked about so far. And as a result, there's not always a good place to introduce a character to the review or start talking about a theme. So what we're going to do is roughly do some first impressions without getting into the plot details, because Gabriel hadn't seen this film before. This is one of my favourites. And after we've done that, we're going to go roughly in order of the plot, and then kind of talk about characters and things like that as it goes, and we're going to kind of go chronologically. This might be the most spoiler safe episode we've ever done, because we're going to have at least 5 minutes before we start saying that John died at the end. So yeah, Gabriel, what was your impression of Summer Wars? Because it seems like you went through a little bit of a character arc with this film. What do you make of it?
Well, I didn't go through as much of a character arc with this film as I did with Mulholland Drive, where it was I had literally two opposing reactions that both happened at the same time. I have a lot of difficulty with Japanese media. There is some, not 100%. There is some small element of every piece of Japanese media that I've ever seen, whether I liked it or not, including Death Note, which I thought was a masterpiece. There is some small element of that doesn't connect with me the way that it should, and the way that it would if I were either Japanese myself or way more into Japanese shit, if that makes sense. So that's always going to be the case, and that was certainly the case here. I didn't warm to the characters as much as I felt I was supposed to. I didn't really warm to any of the characters at all. There was a lot of stuff in that movie that I couldn't personally relate to, so it was a little bit difficult. And in terms of the obviously I couldn't relate to the more fantastical stuff that happened, but really in terms of the family, and this is it's worth getting into what we bring to a piece of art, because this movie is about a big family with strong ties to this family's history, and that didn't exist for me at any point in my life. That kind of stuff was actively discouraged in my upbringing, so that couldn't quite hit me the way that it was supposed to. I liked what it was trying to do, and I think I got what it was trying to do. It was a very efficient piece of work in terms of setting up this family, setting up this scenario, and then letting the events sort of tell you about how this family had sort of waned over time, and what they felt they had lost and what they felt they had to regain in this new modern context. I thought it was a very efficient piece of work in doing that. We could talk about the details and some of the issues I had or didn't have, but basically that was the gist of my experience with it. I didn't love it, but it wasn't a lot of that was probably just my problem, but I did like it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would say that for me, so I really like this film, and I would say that this is not a wild take. This is the second in an informal trilogy of works that just kind of detail Mamoru Hosoda, the director, and his fascination with the internet and what the internet means for us as people and how it serves as an extension of us and our culture being more so if you're Japanese, but to be honest, even in general. And I really like the film because of that. And I'm not going to say much more. I'm just going to start, we'll start talking about the film because my thoughts on it, I think, could be a little bit like I'm going to give this film quite a bit of praise anyway. So I'll sort of go through from here. But I thought we get where Gabriel was coming from the start, because me and Gabriel are coming at it from, I think, fairly different perspectives. Where I grew up with Japanese cinema because I grew up I grew up with Godzilla films, which I loved, and still do. I'm a massive Godzilla fan. The original Godzilla movie is my favourite movie of all time. And then I grew up with Digimon, which is one of the many Japanese cartoons that I watched on TV, and it was my favourite of them. And of those anime, Mamoru Hosoda worked on Digimon. So he worked on Digimon and he explored some ideas of like the internet and how it relates to us in that. Then he did it again in this, and his most recent film that came out last year, Bell, has done it again. And there's been about a decade between each of these visitations. Mamoru Hosoda is not actually that young, but the bottom line is, I think the film itself is great. I think him as a filmmaker he's great. And I'll end up rambling. So let's actually get through it. So
no, that's good. Well, let me say one thing about that, if I can, just comment on what you just said. This movie, my understanding is that this movie was released in 2009, but production began in fits and starts starting in around 2006. And if you see this film, dude, the animation, it looks like the kind of animation that you could have today. The animation in this film was absolute, and I mean the computer stuff. The hand-drawn animation is unbelievable too, of course, but the computer stuff and the way that it ties in with the rest of the hand-drawn animation is absolutely phenomenal. So that's worth saying.
Well, I'll say on the animation because I don't quite know where else I would be able to get into it here, but something I will say, and this is something that Hosoda does a lot, is the colour of the line work in his animation. Because typically in animated films, the characters are drawn, or at the very least outlined, with black lines, because that's the easiest way to get them to pop off of the screen. Now, Mamoru Hosoda, in quite a few of his films, but in this film, it seemed like he was using brown lines, which he does use, instead of black lines, in order to outline the characters in real life. But then, in Oz, which we'll go into in a moment, the digital world, everyone is outlined with red. So it creates a very different feeling, and it does kind of make it feel a bit more like you're in a computer when you do have these characters that they're all drawn with red lines and then coloured in with whatever colours the character was made with. And that's a great way of just separating Oz from the actual world.
The real world. That's really interesting. Obviously I didn't notice that because it was probably designed to not be noticed, but that really worked. That technique you just described, that really worked.
Really quickly, look up King Kazuma and Love Machine, just the images of them, and look, the outlines are red.
You're right. Well done.
It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. That's good.
Alright, so we'll start with that there plot. So, the first 10 minutes of this film are really, really tight. It wastes no time. We're introduced to Oz, which is the digital world that everyone uses, and we know that it's being used for not just gaming and social networking, but it's also used for banking. it's also used for like private passwords. It is essentially the internet in the world of
It's
Summer
what we
Wars.
today call. Yeah, I'm sorry to stop on you. It is what today we call the Internet of Things. Actually, more of the Internet of Things than we're capable of having today. I thought that was ahead of its time too. That idea was less practical than it is today.
Yeah, and now it's just like because it's sort of like it's not a website. It's a replacement for the internet in this film's world.
Yeah.
And even like Nintendo DSs, and they are Nintendo DSs, you can clearly see, they hook up to Oz in a way that I think DSs did hook up to the internet, but not like this. And not only are we introduced to that, how it all works, but it's set up on the news, on the TV, that there's a satellite that is now re-entering Earth's atmosphere after a mission. And then we're introduced to our characters. We've got Kenji, who's a bit of a lonely guy, and he jumps at the chance to go with Natsuki to the countryside to visit her big family. He doesn't know her very well, but she says that it's a job, and he's like, well, I can't really turn that job down to go out for a week away with a pretty lady. So he does that. And then in the opening credits, we're progressively introduced to more and more of the family, as well as King Kazuma, who we will later find out is Natsuki's younger cousin, who is dominating fights in Oz. So we're subtly introduced to him before we're introduced to him. We see his digital avatar, which is the rabbit. And he gets to her home, and we see that it's this massive, like, what I would describe as a manor house. Like, that's not really what it is, but I'm not that familiar with like Japanese architecture. Like, I know what it looks like, but it doesn't matter. The point is, it's like a big old manor house. It's this old house that's rooted in tradition, and we learn that this is an old family that goes back and can trace their lineage for generations. And even in the feudal days of the 1500s, this family was known as a warrior clan. And he meets all the characters, and we have our little character rundown, as it's put in my notes. Of course, we have Kenji, Natsuki, and Kazuma, who are our leads. We have Wabasuke, who will enter the plot a little bit later. He's the black sheep uncle of the family, who we'll talk about more later. He's quite important. We've got this traditional kung fu fisherman, who's their grandmother, the family's matriarch, her son. We've got a doctor, a tech guy, a police officer, a firefighter, and then we've got the sort of the women in their life and like their sisters and that, who don't do as much. So overnight, an AI called Love Machine hacks Oz. It takes over Kenji's account, and then it goes to town, taking over other people's accounts. Very, very quickly, we do away with this whole lie that Kenji's not actually a boyfriend, and that's out of the way. Natsuki only wanted them to think that Kenji was a boyfriend because she was worried that her grandmother would die without thinking that she's being looked after. So that's done away with very, very, very quickly. And they don't make a huge thing of like, oh, you lied to us, how can we ever trust you? They get rid of this very, very quick. And now, as Love Machine has taken over, they've all got to try and stop her. And this is where we talk about the Chad fucking Granny. Love Machine, right? He starts hacking things. He starts stopping the traffic lights from working, shutting down trains, just causing general domestic chaos. And Granny goes, well, I'm gonna get out my phone book. And this old lady just starts phoning everyone she knows, calling in favors from everyone, and she's just like, hey, you remember me back from like 1921 and I punched you in the face? Well, that's all water under the bridge now. I understand that your sons do this important job, right? Tell them to get on it. Now you go out there, you do this, you do that, and we're all going to band together. And you're just like, this woman's a national hero.
And she absolutely spurs everybody into action in such a way that it actually fixes the problems that are happening all over the country. Yeah. That was well done, Shad Grandma.
So this granny, she has such great lines as, "No, I'm not hard of hitting. Maybe if you put your dentures in and enunciated, I'd be able to understand you."
Yeah.
Which got me, but essentially what happens is Love Machine somehow traces back through, I guess, everyone's accounts that Granny is the source of Love Machine's problems. So Love Machine, who thinks he's playing a game, as Wabasuke, who is the black sheep of the family, is revealed to have actually created Love Machine. Well, Love Machine thinks it's playing a game, and to win, it fucks about with Granny's heart monitor, which is linked up to her son-in-law's phone, and it just shuts it off, and he doesn't get the readings for her angina. So Love Machine kills Granny, and they have this moment of mourning, and then the men of the family decide we cannot just sit on our asses like we always do. This could happen to someone else. So the Kung Fu uncle reminds them of their warrior history and that they have to stop Love Machine. And they get a supercomputer from their tech guy's shop. They fuel it with energy from the Kung Fu guy's fishing boat. They get military grade equipment from the member of the family who's in the army, who seems to do a more important job than he lets on. And they just hook it all up to a weapons grade satellite and come up with a plan based on what they did in the feudal era to beat another clan. And they send Kazuma, who is the younger cousin, who is the best fighter in all of Oz, to take him on. They beat Love Machine, but due to a mishap, Love Machine manages to escape from the trap and then summons all the power of its stolen accounts and targets a satellite to drop it down. It targets that satellite that was buzzing round to drop it down on a nuclear reactor, which could kill millions. So, at this point, the War Games comparisons come in, and this is where it borrows a lot from Digimon Our War Game, where the villain of the Digimon short film that followed on from the TV series had a full thing. And before, I'd said to Gabriel that I wasn't going to get into this, but something I hear a lot, and we talked about this in private, and I guess we'll go over it again, is that people will often accuse this film of being a rip-off of the 80s film War Games. And I had two thoughts on that. The first is that you can have more than one film that deals with similar ideas. The second thing was, if you're going to invoke Summer Wars as a rip-off of War Games, you also kind of have to acknowledge that Summer Wars is a lot better than War Games.
So, just to deal with the really, in my opinion, odd comparison between War Games and Summer Wars, which I have seen those comparisons when looking into this afterward. The only thing that makes those two films similar is the subplot where an AI is going to cause a nuclear holocaust, basically. Apart from that, I would challenge anybody to tell me anything that's similar between those two things. And it's worth noting that I think you're correct, and Summer Wars has a lot more plots and subplots that actually have meaning, like family and history and values and the sort of a modernizing your older values and hanging on to them, but updating them to the War Games is just about an AI who's gonna do a nuclear holocaust thing if this kid doesn't stop him. There's really not much more to it than that. So yeah, I think you're right. I think
War Games just coasts on 80s Cold War tension.
Yeah, and that's all it needed. That's all it needed to do. Summer Wars is doing a lot more. It's a completely different. It has a completely different goal in mind than War Games did.
So they go and they realize now that there is going to be a satellite that was orbiting Earth, and it's going to drop down on one of Earth's many nuclear reactors, and that would cause a massive explosion, and lots and lots and lots of people will die. So after they have tried to do all this, Wabasuke, who is the uncle who also serves as the inspiration for Natsuki's lie for who Kenji is, she says that he went to America, he's like an MIT graduate and stuff like that. She'd actually just based him on her uncle, because her uncle is someone that she admires, and he is the adopted son of Granny, whose husband had an affair, and he went into home, and after her husband died, she was like, well, he's in an orphanage. He was my husband's responsibility. My husband's not here. I know he exists now. He's my responsibility. Now, she leaves a letter for what to do after she died. And basically what she says, in quite a touching letter, is that they're all fine, but Wabasuke is the wayward son, and he needs to be brought back into the family and treated right, regardless of when or if he comes back after seemingly leaving the family. And yes, the touching line that I really like, which was that hunger and loneliness are the two worst things in the world, but thanks to my family, I never experienced it once in my 90 years. So she doesn't want that for Wabasuke. She wants him to come back into the family. So they call Wabasuke, they get him to come back home after he left their family party early, after Granny tried to kill him. It's complicated. And he comes back and he slows down. His plan is that that they need to slow down and get all of the accounts back off of Love Machine, and the way they're going to do that is Natsuki's going to play the card game that is a recurring motif in this film of them playing this card game, and she gambles the accounts off of Love Machine while Wabasuke slows down his programming enough that King Kazuma can destroy Love Machine. So as they're doing this game, going back and forth, they keep trading more and more accounts. Eventually, Love Machine wins, and Natsuki has got nothing to gamble with, and it's like, oh no, we're in trouble. And then we get the reveal that actually they're being, because Oz is connected to everyone has been watching them, and everyone starts giving their accounts to Natsuki so that she can continue to gamble until finally they get every account off of them. King Kazuma destroys Love Machine, and then Kenji, who was our fish out of water character, he finally gets his little character arc where he breaks the math code and he stops the missile, and he stops the missile from hitting their house. And then the film wraps. And now we can actually kind of talk about the themes and the ideas of the film. So
now that we've got all that set up, yes.
Yeah. And I hope people listening can see as to why this maybe was a little bit long-winded and rambly, but this film is really, really dense. I didn't even bring up the fact that there's a baseball game that one of the family is taking part in, on the other side of Japan, and that as things get more serious for the family, things get more difficult in the baseball game, until
Yeah.
finally they win at the end and he wins the baseball game. I didn't even bring up that stuff. This is a really
I'm
dense
actually,
film.
yeah, I'm glad you did mention that just now because I really liked that. You have a modern, colorful, digital game, quote unquote, going on in the whole Oz thing, and you have a conventional game going on that the older generation would be into, and you have both of those things juxtaposed at the same time. I thought that was a nice touch. That's something that actually stood out to me. Yeah, it does take a while to settle this up because if we just talked about those elements, you have to know what those elements are in order to talk about them. So yeah, let's talk about them. Very generally, everything that you described about the emotional locus of this film has to do with the family and the family coming back together. That letter that you described, um, how she felt about one of the wayward children needing to come back, and the hunger and loneliness and all that. Those are the central themes of the movie, and the love machine war games kind of thing is really just a it's not a MacGuffin, but you know what I mean. It's a delivery device for that message. And I really thought about this because I can be overly critical sometimes, and I can be overly analytical, especially when it comes to children's films and things like that. Um, there were things that I could have said about the guy who designed Love Machine and why he did that and what his arc was. There are things that I could have said about that I'm not going to say because this was a film for general audiences, and you don't get the kinds of themes that you're talking about in films for general audiences very much. And I I can overlook is too strong a word. That makes it sound like the elements were bad and they're not. But I can accept a certain amount of uh, hiccups and motivations and stuff like that for a greater good in other films. So I feel I owed it to this film to do that because what it's aiming at is so much better than a lot of the children's media that we got later. And I say children's, it's not specifically a children's film, but
But it's a film
you
that
know
you
what I
can
mean.
watch. This is the only film we've ever covered where I suggested that Gabe could actually watch this one with his son,
Mhm.
who
Yeah.
who, who,
And
who
I
is a
and I
little boy.
yeah. Yeah, and I would actually if he unfortunately we've had a lot of scheduling conflicts in my little family over the last while, but I would have with no problem done that. Uh yeah, I you know, let me let me do you know what, you can cut this completely if you want to, but let me compare this to something. When I was growing up, one of my favorite movies was I think it was called The Chipmunk Adventure or The Great Chipmunk Adventure, and it was this really actually, if you want to look into this film, the production of the movie, it was a whole bunch of ex-Disney animators that got together and worked like dogs in order to make this thing look as good as it did. If you look at any scene from this movie, you're going to be like, holy shit, the animation for this was incredible. It was human labor that did that, to say the least. But there were a lot of really heavy elements in that film, in the Chipmunk movie of all things, that I really liked, and it also was a little bit more grounded. It had grounded in reality elements and fantastical elements together, kind of like this thing did, and I can imagine that's something that I've always liked. When I was growing up, I liked movies that were sort of a little bit more grounded, a little bit adult themed, but also for kids. In other words, and this movie actually did that in a way that I hadn't seen in a long time, and certainly I haven't seen since.
No, 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 absolutely. Like
Yeah.
I like that because I could see some people who are very hardcore into anime rejecting the notion that this is a kids film, but I don't see this with any sort of derogatory nature at all. Like,
I don't think it is derogatory. You could, An American Tail was a kids' film. It had heavy elements that adults could watch. There are important films that were made for, if not specifically children, then general audiences, and children and parents and whatnot that are important. That have, saying that it's for children doesn't necessarily mean that it's frivolous or stupid or,
I would say that it, at its heart, it's both a coming of age story for Natsuki, and it's a film literally about family. There's running jokes of like people saying this film's really about family. This film actually is.
Yeah,
and
it's funny. It's funny. I was thinking about that trope. Oh, it's about family. Yeah, but and I was thinking specifically that this one actually is. You're right. I thought those exact words went through my head when I was watching it.
Because let's talk about Wabasuke, because Wabasuke is there's, I would say there are three main protagonists of this film, and I say that because they each get a moment in the finale where Natsuki, she beats Love Machine in the card game, then finally King Kazuma gets to get that final really satisfying smack on Love Machine and destroy it for good after having lost the previous two fights against Love Machine. And then Kenji gets to make up for the fact that he didn't get into the Maths Olympics, and he cracks the code and he redirects the missile and he saves everyone. It's a satellite, but now it's fallen, it's a missile. Right. But I would say that Wabasuke, of the supporting characters, is also very important in the same way that Granny is very important. And there's not really anyone you can take out of this film. But he is important because the whole reason Love Machine exists is because the family used to be rich and now they're quite poor and they're hanging on to what they had. And he wanted to make up for it. And when I said earlier Granny tries to kill him, that's because when it's revealed that Wabasuke made Love Machine, he did so because he wanted to bring money back to the family. And she's ashamed because in him doing that, he has put people's lives at risk. And of course, lo and behold, his actions did cause Granny to die. And what I like about this film is that this film is... they all have to come together. They have to embrace their traditional values as a family that had a strong warrior lineage, and they have to go to war again against Love Machine, hence the title Summer Wars. I don't know what the film's called in Japanese, but I think Summer Wars is a good title for it in English. And what I love about this film is that the internet is very often demonized in the media. And there are lots and lots and lots of reasons to be mad about the internet. Lord knows I'm mad about the internet. But the reasons people are mad about the internet are never the actual reasons they portray it negatively in film. The reason the internet is portrayed negatively in film is because, broadly speaking, old media, as it gets termed, doesn't understand the internet very well. A good example would be a very salient point by a very stupid man when a right-wing YouTube politics commentator in an interview with a TV journalist was asked to explain a meme, and he said there's no point because you guys are so far removed from the internet, you won't understand it anyway. So there's no point me even trying to explain this thing here because you are so far removed from the culture of the internet. And that's why the internet usually gets portrayed quite negatively in films. A very salient point from a very stupid man.
Yeah, look at even the two. So two of our politicians over here had very serious controversies over their unsecure internet servers that they were using because they don't understand how these technologies work. So yeah.
But Summer Wars doesn't do that. Summer Wars would have gone, look at humanity, it's so focused on the internet now and all of their eggs are in one basket, and that's stupid. And it does a little bit satirize of like, yeah, we're getting really dependent on the internet and that could be dangerous. But it doesn't just fucking put a middle finger up at you and go, I'm smart, you're dumb. It doesn't go, look, no one's... It doesn't go, look, everyone living in the moment, not a cell phone in sight. It shows that
Right.
Oz and the internet are another way for people to bond and to stay together. Like, it brings them together, and they're brought together through Oz, through the internet, to stop a problem. It shows it as an extension of how we as people communicate and relate to one another, and how the internet is just an extension of that. Of course, if you're listening to this right now, you're listening to two people that you've never met in person, who have also never met each other in person yet, talk about a film that neither of us would have heard of was it not for the internet.
Mhm.
It's an extension
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah, it is. You're right, and it's portrayed in this film as as just the modern way of life, just like the ancient way of life was. They use an ancient strategy to deal with the problem. It's just the infrastructure that they live in, and that's how it's portrayed as neither. You're right, and neither good nor bad. It can be used for good or bad.
It's fire.
And
It's fire.
Yeah,
it's a tool to be used, but it can be dangerous.
Exactly. And I like what I like the observation you made, and I noticed this too. They don't smash up their cell phones and say, well, now we're all happier because we, got rid of all of our servers and got rid of Comcast, and now we're all playing baseball or something. They absolutely don't do that. They continue to live as modern people. They just reclaim their values in a modern context, and that's exactly what we all need to do. And that was a really good message of the film. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because like in the world of the film, Oz isn't going anywhere. You're gonna have to learn to live with it, and that means
And
the
guess
good
what,
and that
guys?
means the bad.
The internet's not. Yeah, guess what, guys? The internet's not going anywhere either, and we do have to learn to live with it. And we have not begun to solve that problem, which is one of the reasons that this movie's important.
Yeah, and like obviously the reason that what they say, this doesn't happen in the film. The nuclear threat in the film comes from a satellite that was in orbit being confused and brought down towards a nuclear reactor. But I can't remember if it's Wabisque or Kazuma that points it out. Maybe neither of them. But someone in the film points out that the president uses Oz. Love Machine could hack the president of Japan's account, or the president of the United States account, or any significant world leader, and launch a missile strike. Now, I like to imagine that that's not how our nuclear weapons actually work.
It isn't. It isn't. I can tell you, based on my
I reckon it's all analog. I reckon it's like a fucking wind up clock and like someone walkie-talkieing in going, okay, do it now.
So you have to. So I learned a little bit about this when the current crisis in Eastern Europe that we're still having started, because I felt it would behoove me to know about some of this stuff. You cannot authorize a nuclear strike through social media. Like they have to verify, and more than one person has to verify that those orders are coming from the president. So so at this stage there is no way that you could that could happen. But
we'll be watching over our shoulder for Love Machine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well,
Yes.
let's talk about war games for a moment. Let's just very briefly talk about war
Okay.
games, because I want to compare Love Machine to the AI from war games, because Love Machine is so much better.
Well, the AI in war. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I understand that the point of the AI in war games is that it's a faceless algorithm that doesn't think or feel.
Right.
But I think Love Machine's just better. Like the AI from war games, it does think it's playing a game, but through it being a physical presence in Oz, at least, like, I mean, a physical presence on camera, you can see it. You get this inhuman, I want to say, kind of like almost looks like maybe a Hindu god from art, but I don't know enough to say for sure. But like, you have like a pretty much unmoving face, just a mask, but you see the way Love Machine not only fights, because the fight scenes in this are fantastic, the choreography is excellent, and I'm not surprised that the next film this director did was ostensibly a martial arts movie, The Boy and the Beast. But not only are those fights brilliant, the way he moves is brilliant. Love Machine is always threatening and intimidating, but above all else, always kind of seems unfeeling, because they have that sort of unfeeling vibe, but they still give it a face. And I think that this Summer Wars with Love Machine, they do have their cake and eat it, and they pull it off. The only time Love Machine really starts emoting is when it turns into that massive shadow.
Yeah.
When it's at its most powerful. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just gonna say, the difference is, I think, I think the message that both films were trying to get across was specifically regarding the AI was so different. My recollection is that the AI in war games communicated only through text.
Yeah.
Or maybe like a Stephen Hawking sort of voice simulator or something. I don't even know if there was that. And it behaved as, exactly as you said, a cold, emotionless algorithm that wasn't even attempting to simulate human thought or human anything. The AI in Summer Wars behaved like an algorithm that was trying to simulate human behavior and human emotion and that sort of thing, which is what gave it its creepiness in a different way than in war games, where it was just this really what now would seem to be a very primitive computer program, whereas in war games it was the uncanny valley of the simulation of the. I guess what I'm trying to say is, in war games the AI wasn't even trying to simulate human behavior, and in Summer Wars it was, and they're very distinct in that sense.
Yeah, it is that sort of like, it's there, it's physically there, it's fighting, it has a relatively human appearance until it doesn't, but it's got like an unmoving face with a permanent smile. It's called Love Machine. And also,
which is the most internet name that they could have come up with. That was definitely
yeah. But also, like, you understand the logic of it through, like, when Wabasuke says it's playing a game, and it looks about, and it say when it stops Granny's vitals tracker, it does it because it just scours through all of Oz. It figures out where all of the phone calls and everything are coming from, and it pins it all back to Grandma Jinouchi and goes, "You're why I'm losing. I'm gonna stop your vitals tracker." And that's fucking evil. He's cheating. Yeah. He's not just trying to win, he's cheating. And Love Machine doesn't even know. And that's part of what I think is quite scary about Love Machine, is that it seems to be malicious, but I don't think it is.
Mhm. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, because, well, is it even capable of maliciousness? I think, could, and that's a good question. Um, and yeah, it does seem to be malicious. That is cheating, but then does it consider it cheating, or does it because it thinks everything is a simulation, just like he is?
The one
Yeah.
thing to me that I think might imply that Love Machine is to a degree conscious and not just an algorithm is that when it steals King Kazuma's account just before it loses the card game, the shadow of it sprouts rabbit ears, which obviously King Kazuma's avatar is a rabbit. It's a kung fu fighting bunny, which is again, funnily enough, a motif that this director seems to like, because the Boy and the Beast, the great lord and most fearsome fighter in all the land, is a rabbit. But it sprouts bunny ears, which implies to me that it's maybe taunting, or at least celebrating the fact that it's finally been able to stop King Kazuma, albeit for all of 5 minutes before King Kazuma destroys it.
Right. Yeah, I see your point. That may be. That may be. Again, this thing was designed specifically to emulate the normal behavior of a player. So yeah, that's an interesting question, and one that I think is ambiguous in the film. That's a good point. Let,
It
let
didn't
me
start
ask you.
Halo 2 teabagging, though.
Well, I mean, that was its first mistake. That's how you know it's an AI and not a real person, because any red-blooded American player of anything will start teabagging your. Let me ask you one question. I didn't understand the thing about the ice. Why did that guy remove the ice and put it around a dead body? Is that something to do with Japanese culture that I missed?
Oh, no, I think it's because it's in the summer, and they probably want to keep the flies off of her, and they probably don't want the body to start smelling or decomposing, because obviously they've got... Yeah, because they have to keep her there until like funeral people come. So I think the police
Right.
officer, like the overprotective cousin, I think he saw all of the blocks of ice, and he's thick as shit. So rather than thinking maybe they're around all of this computer tech for a reason to keep it cool, I think it was literally that he just wanted to keep the room cool and keep Granny preserved before the
Right.
Undertakers come.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that. I somehow I couldn't quite understand why he was doing that. Okay.
There might be something that I'm missing, but I don't think so. I think it was just that he wanted to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That
Just
makes
keep
sense.
it cold in there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's see. What else can we say? Well, do you want to go into final thoughts or?
Yeah, let's go into final thoughts.
Okay, so my final thoughts. I think that we have had I'm wondering if I want to say big. Well, you know what? Fuck Marvel fans. I think that we have had such a dearth of really meaningful um, films and media for the sort of younger to older kids demographic in the last decade or so that this is absolutely worth seeing. There's actual meaningful content in this, which I don't think you have that much of in children and family media today. And we don't really have movies about family anymore. To use the trope again. So yeah, if the people listening have a chance to see it, you won't be sorry you did.
I'll say, if you're watching this close to the time we uploaded it, this film can be a challenge to find. And
Yeah.
my recommendation is, if you've got some money spare, I would actually recommend buying a DVD or Blu-ray of this film, because I think that's the best bet because it's so inconsistent on streaming services. It's very hard to find. We had to go through the 9 rings of hell to get Gabriel to see this.
Agreed. Yeah.
But yeah, my closing thoughts is actually I love this film, and I really wanted to talk about one that was something we could have a real conversation about the sort of the themes and the ideas and what the film's trying to do, but at the same time, this film is also kind of a popcorn film, and we don't very often do those films. It often because if it's not like a Marvel film, you don't really get many of them, and something that we try not to do, not out of any sort of contrarianism towards Marvel or DC and that, but we try to not talk about films that everyone is talking about. This is our repertory cinema, if you will, that we're sipping drinks in right now. Yeah, so I wanted to do something that was kind of a popcorn film, was kind of like a bit more of a people pleaser. We've never done an animated film before, and if you want to watch a hand-drawn animated film, your only option is Japanese animation now, because Japan, bless them, they will not stop. They have seen that they can make films cheaper with digital technology, and they don't care. This is a point of pride for them to do hand-drawn animated films, whereas Disney doesn't do them anymore. Like DreamWorks doesn't exist anymore. And so, yeah, I think this is a film for all ages. A film for all ages. It's got it all.
Yeah.
It's got action. It's got romance. It's got a chase scene. It's got a kung fu rabbit. It's got an evil AI. It's got meaningful themes and ideas, but it's also entertaining. For some people, this film won't land, but for me, this was a film that I found was entertaining, but I had a meaningful experience with it. And that is always the question of like, what people will say, well, why can't a film just be fun? And lots of things are fun, but if you can have something that's fun but also have a meaningful experience with it as a piece of art, regardless of what it is, for me, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, so that was Summer Wars. Join us next time when we'll certainly be talking about something.
We absolutely will be talking about something next time. Write it down. It's in the bag.
Bye.
Bye.